Charles, we all been searching our hearts to be kind since your mom died. A man from the bank wants to buy your house and reclaim their debt.
Mr. Charles Blakey?
Yeah, I'm Blakey.
I have it in mind to rent your basement for a couple of months.
Oh, what? Well, I'm sorry, but this house ain't for sale or for rent.
Maybe this is a bad time.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for this evening's screening of The Man in My Basement. And I'm joined tonight by the cinematographer. So I'm Christopher Ross, BSc. I'm joined tonight by cinematographer Ula Pontikos BSc and the director of the film, Nadia Latif.
Thanks for coming.
And I'm a bit rusty because I haven't done this Q&A thing for like 4 years because I've been doing that other job. So thank you very much for joining us.
We are so privileged to get the last few months of the president of the BSC to do this Q&A. Historical moment.
Privileged to be asked. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you for sharing your film with us, and what a beautifully disturbing experience it is. I hope everybody's recovering.
Willem Dafoe covered in shit doesn't do it for you?
Yeah. So firstly, Nadia, you co-wrote the screenplay with Walter Mosley, the author of the source novel. So how did that come about, and how did that manifest itself?
This is my first film, and it was also my first screenplay. I was not a writer. I've been a theatre director for 20 years. So it's that weird thing of like I'm quite long in the tooth in some ways, and like here I am having my film debut. So, you know, it's mainly the Botox, but I feel young again. I read the novel 21 years ago when it was published. I was at university and somebody left it on a table. Like I didn't know who Walter Mosley was. I just thought the title was cool. And I read it and was just obsessed with it. And, you know, I was struggling at university at the time, you know, with the kind of like overwhelming whiteness of a literature degree. And, you know, and here was this black man who'd written this kind of wicked, dark book. And I thought it was so funny, and it was just so complicated, and the image. I mean, you've all seen the film, so now I can say this. But the image, the idea that capitalism could be tied into this visual metaphor of a man buying a baby to give to another man to feed to his dog, really, for whatever reason, just really spoke to me. And but I went to be a theatre director, and then. Was moving towards making my first short film, and I knew the guy who was going to direct this film before me, and he called me up and he was like, "Hey, you love this Walter Mosley novel?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can I talk to you about it?" I was like, "Why?" He's like, "I'm adapting it to be a film." I was like, "Fuck!" And I didn't know where to talk to him, and I was like, I could just push him down the stairs. But I didn't even have a first short film. And then I made a short film, and I asked my agent, you know, what happened with that? And she was actually there looking for a director, and I just turned up with like a 90-page deck, being like, this is how we do it. Like, I've been thinking about this for 21 years. And they flew me out to LA. I mean, and, you know, more power to Protagonists, who were the British producers on the film. I really didn't have a finished short film. So, like, to take a punt on quite a, you know, big bit of kind of, you know, he's a literary titan. And they flew me out to meet Walter, and I kind of left that meeting. And honestly, they called me and they were like, will you stay? Will you just stay and work on the script with him? And at that time, he was writing. And he wrote on it for a couple of years on his own. Not a couple of years, probably like a year. And then the pandemic happened, and I just felt like there were things that I needed to say in the film that I had to write myself. So I just kind of worked up the nuts to be like, dear Walter, I think I need to write this film now. And he very graciously just let me do what I needed to do. And so I think I say that the film and the book are cousins, not twins. I think the film is probably darker and more baroque than the book. And it's got a lot of my own kind of politics in it. And I also think that I would say that it kind of looks at men as objects in quite an interest. You know, I don't think, maybe you can't look objectively at men. But I think that I was interested in kind of looking at manhood in a slightly different way. I think the book is more earnest, and I'm think I was more interested in, like, objectively, it's pretty ridiculous that these two men in this basement think that they are really negotiating good and evil. But so yeah, I think that's the long version of that, actually.
And then, so you spend, I don't know, what, 4 years?
I think I've been working on it for 6 years now.
Yeah, and so you get the words after a long period of time. What then leads you to the next phase of collaboration, so into the production process and to discovering Ula and working together? And
There was lots of stop-starts.
It's so many stops and starts. We got stopped by the pandemic. We got stopped by the strikes. It's just like we ran out of weather. I learned not to wait for weather and just reset the film in the winter. It was a whole thing. But yeah.
I remember when we met on Zoom and I asked you what is so, just going back to what you were saying, you know, how do you imagine two women filming the story about men? Do you remember what did you answer?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Was it really stupid?
No.
Was it profound?
But the interesting part of the crewing up is that Nadia actually chose mainly women to tell that story. All the heads of department were women. The designer, except Mark, but
yeah, sneaky editor, and sneaky composer.
And they were all sort of whether black or non-English speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that obviously, like, lived experience is a really important thing, but you have to treat a piece of fiction also like a piece of fiction. And also, I think, like, we were all coming at it, you know, really the film is about colonialism, and lots of people have different relationships to colonialism. You know, our first AD is Belgian, and he has a very specific relationship with the notion of colonialism, and it's a you know, the whole thing about white guilt in it was very felt by him in some ways. So I sort of was interested in people having different ways into the story. And so, like, our costume designer is an African-American woman who lived on the East Coast in the 90s, and she was like, I've got some knitwear somewhere that'll do. Like, I think Corey's wearing one of her jumpers from the period, and it's pretty great. But I think the thing that led me to Ula is, like, I think I've seen all of her films, just, like, naturally. I was like, I've seen all the films that she's made. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's somebody who exists in my kind of film upbringing, and I didn't go to film school. I learned to love films through watching films, and so you sort of go, well, of course I'm going to love this person because I love her films, and I love that they all look different, but there feels like there's an integrity. I don't like to talk to actors about psychology. I don't like to talk about a character's psychology. I like to talk to actors about actions, so what characters do. And psychology is what happens in between those two things. I'm incredibly interested in talking to cinematographers about psychology because the camera has to have its own psychology. It's not sentient, it can't do that. So we have to figure out the psychology. And I was so interested in what I felt was like the camera's psychology in all of Ula's films. Like, I felt that kind of sentience, that kind of opinion of a camera. Like, it's not telling me what to think, but it is giving me its point of view, and that feels considered, and it feels lived in, and it doesn't feel like a stylistic intervention. It feels like a psychological opinion, and that's what I knew the story needed. Also, nobody shoots black skin as well as Ula Pontikos. I'm sorry, you heard it here, but, like, she just makes all black people look beautiful, and it was so important to me for this film to feel like this was a community of black people that you wanted to lean into, that you were like, look, they're so inviting and incredible, and they all, you know, they look like the house party, you know. I was like, you want to feel like you want to be at that party with those people, but also that you know who they are. So, and we live down the road from each other, which makes life quite easy.
Yeah, it makes life, it makes a protracted prep.
Can I just add
easier.
that Simone also had a big part in making black people beautiful. Our colorist, Simone Gracetola.
Who's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, Ula, what led you to say yes?
I was intrigued by the script, and I thought that it, you know, throughout the years of watching men telling story about women, I thought it was actually a very interesting proposition to flip that and tell as women telling the stories about men. and see how it feels, because most of the time the scripts I get is the women's stories. I remember when I had once I got a project sent over where there was in the first episode there was maybe 2 lines of a woman, the rest of them was a story about men. I was shocked that actually it landed on my in my inbox. So I thought that first of all, telling the story about predominantly from a men's point of view was very interesting, and also a story which teaches me something about other viewpoints. So I think it's essential to be able to, inject yourself within empathetically into telling the story, but also as an observer and as a viewer and as an artist trying to figure out and learn from other viewpoints. And I thought this world is actually really quite alien to me. And I love the sort of the dual aspect of the script where you have just this intense conversation between 2 protagonists about the philosophy on life and race and corporate versus individual responsibility versus the bizarre dreamscape of how it is to suffer and being a caregiver. One of the things about this film, which I haven't said before, Chris came to do the tech recce for us, which was a bit of a curveball because my dad died during the prep, and actually more so I think a lot of projects sort of land on your lap in the right time of your life, and that was one of the projects I couldn't really hit more personally. At the time where I got given the script and when I got the support from you and also support from the production and Nadia and the subject matter to be filming with it. I mean, it was such a cathartic journey.
That's amazing. So you start the process, you have lots of coffees because you live around the corner from each other. But what does the phase where you're trying to discover the psychology of the camera, what does that look like? What are you diving into references? Are you diving into specific logistics of how you shoot the thing? What does that first 12 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks look like?
12 weeks. We were just done by then.
Yeah. We prepped and shot. What do you think about? Did we have 6 weeks? We had 6 weeks prep?
We had 5 weeks prep. That prep was taken 2 weeks of me being away and 2 weeks which we regained for Christmas. So Nadia and I
would just sit on Zoom every day
between the family and the grief and the Christmas of it all. It was really brilliant because I just remember we're just going, okay, so we're going to spend another 2 hours on Zoom and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, it was. I had a really long watch list of films, which everybody in the production got, and there were also and a lot of those were not literal. A lot of them were just sort of point of view, and by that I mean like a philosophical, political point of view. So a lot of kind of anti-colonial cinema, but also Harry, he's here to help, and Oni Baba, and do you know what I mean? It's really kind of got nothing to do with the film, but it's all about just the things that are feeding you. And then a lot of kind of art books as well, in particular the photography of Carrie Mae Weems and the portraiture of Alice Neal and the paintings of Lynette Iadam-Boakye. And I think probably Lynette was the thing that was most helpful, particularly when thinking about colour. And this was in production design. Everybody was drawing from the same.
And the darkness of it.
But exactly that. Yeah. That a lot of times she puts black people against very, very dark backgrounds. And there's a kind of, not to sound too wanky, a light within. There's no illumination in the painting. But you feel a sense of the light coming from within. And, when you're making film that's a lot about black people in the dark, just kind of remembering that was really helpful. Those also went to the actors. So we're all kind of drawing from the same palette. And then I, for whatever reason, decided to draw a bunch of storyboards, which most people found useless because it was just here's a dog. But actually, I think it was more important for me to try and communicate things visually to Ula than to ask her to do it for. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, here's my shit version of it.
Yeah, like a handover process. Like, here's my
Yeah.
baby, take care of it.
Exactly.
And
Sometimes
we really needed it because the prep was so short. So whether we ended up with the storyboard or not, it was a way in to figure out what really Nadia wants from the story she has written and spent the last 4 years with.
And a lot of those were quite like minute things. Like it was all just about like eyeline shifts and kind of slight camera shifts to kind of communicate who had power in scenes. Do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of, a lot of it was on the page. So it was a bit like, you know, he looks out the car window. You know, there was one where I was like, there's, you know, occasionally I'd nick one directly from a film just because I was like, I can't be asked to draw this. And I'd be like, road to perdition, car 2-shot. Do you know what I mean? I'm not drawing this. Screen grab. Do you know what I mean? But more or less I did try and draw most of them, which everybody found pretty laughable. But I was like, I just feel like it's really good to do for me rather than be in a kind of, because I feel like you get into... I think it's Ava DuVernay says being a director is just being question answer in chief. But I was like, oh, it's quite nice to sort of make an offer rather than sort of you are having to just ask me. I think it sort of puts the onus on the cinematographer too much. And it felt nice to be like, here is my opening pencil drawn offer to you. Let's not do that because that's terrible. But we'll do something better than that.
But also it transpired that this is a story told about two people occupying the frame in various power situation. So whether it's Charles with narcissist falling in love, getting closer and far away, whether it's a power struggle between Charles and Aniston, you know, it's a story told through a number of two shots. And I think it's easy and also very difficult to then figure out what the camera does around it. And when we didn't want to move the camera for the sake of it, we wanted to introduce a style where it is actually quite observational at the beginning, when we put the cameras and let actors to occupy, but then it becomes more and more unsettled. And, you know, we decide to start move the camera, go handheld, and start using slight Dutch angles and bring the camera really close to actors' faces. I mean, there are times where I was so close to Willem and Charles that the mud box or the lens were touching the skin because it was all about like breaking that closeness and bring the intensity.
Yeah, I think there's that in the sequence where they start to really confront each other and Charles sort of takes a stand and tries to, you know, take some kind of ownership over the relationship, and slowly over the period of sort of 4 or 5 scenes, you sort of dissolve the cage and allow them to have clean wide-angle close-ups for the first time to really allow them to kind of butt heads in the most volatile way.
Because it was really important where we're putting the camera.
Yeah, and also because it's actually a really limiting experience for both those actors because the eyeline is always complicated by the bars, and so that it's sort of like hit my mark with my feet, but also hit my eyeline marks. If I go wrong, I'm either going to go boss-eyed or you're not going to be able to see me because I can't tell that you've got a bar. Do you know what I mean? So it was, they both did very well at it, but I think that everyone was like, oh, this is way more precise than
and we discovered that I think in the Silence of the Lambs they have different cage sizes. Mm-hmm. So each lens, obviously, which I've learned is that when you go on a 40mm, the lens is very different than when you go on 85, and the bars start opening up. You know, you think it's obvious, but actually, you know, we were learning the hard way. When you start going on a longer lens, the bars were sort of giving a little bit more space. But I think for that, we didn't want to shoot everything. We want to have a level of intensity and being quite close. So sometimes the sort of, you know, the density of bars was and the lens choice were deliberate, although really quite a pain in the butt.
Yeah, because I guess if you can see the actor, the chances are they can't see each other, and that's generally quite useful when you're in an argument situation.
There's a shot, I won't say which one it is, but you can see Willem minutely change his eyeliner because he realises he's done it wrong. Yeah. He's like, fuck, Corey can't see me.
And everybody was swearing really badly at some point behind the camera.
There's so many like takes where it's just like one of them's talking and they just go back. And you're like, yeah, reset, sorry.
Reset, bars. So the film seems like a kind of love child between David Lynch and Charles Burnett. It's very observational, but it's observational in a very quirky way. And there's a kind of, to the color palette and to the framing, a kind of African Americana, as if it's photographed by a kind of William Eggleston sort of idea. Obviously, the production designer, big part of this, lots of amazing colors. So Catherine Eder was the production designer. How did you guys fit in this collaboration? And do you want to just say a little bit about the set builds? Cardiff is not the most American of cities, I would say. I think it's fair to say that the Welsh would also agree that it's quite hard to find Sag Harbor in Cardiff.
Not as hard as you think. Not in. I think we only shot. I think only the funeral / wedding is in Cardiff. Everything else is like round and about. Yeah. And we did
the funeral was in the
that's in the
that's in
Cardiff
the crematorium.
But and then outside's the wedding. But same extras, same suits, different ties. But it was Catherine Eder, who's a brilliant production designer, and I had seen a film that she designed, The Night House, which I had genuinely really admired for the production design, because I was like, it does sort of the same thing in this film, where it has to go from being like a practical house to being a place of psychological terror. She starts to, if anyone, sorry to spoil the film, but she sees the ghost of her dead husband, but just through shifts in lighting, which really interested me. It's like, with the lights on, that's a coat stand, but with the lights off, it's like somebody stood in the doorway. And she'd done that practically, and I was really interested with that. She was working on the project through kind of various iterations of it. And when we were like, we're gonna need a bigger house, she was like, okay, let's do it. I think unfortunately, because of how the kind of scheduling worked, a lot of those decisions had to be sort of started and being built. So the whole house, ground floor, basement, first floor, are all built on a stage, and then the exterior of the house we built in a wood. So two sides of the house and a bit of the roof. But a lot of those decisions had to be made without thinking about where the camera was going to go. And no matter how generous what a production designer can be, you're always like, if only this window had been 3 inches higher, or But it went as sort of well as it could, but only because she's a genius and would just go, we'll make it happen somehow.
I've managed to move the staircase, which I actually thought that was a good idea.
I was amazed when you were like, we're going to take the top of the staircase off. It's like, I'll tell you what I learned writing a film for the first time. If you write down top-down shot, a lot of stuff's involved in that. Yeah. Like I was like, top-down shot, sausages in a pan, and this like mini crane comes in. I was like, I don't know if in my head I thought you just took a camera and went. But I was like, and when I was like, top-down shot, him scrambling up the stairs, she was like, I guess we're taking the ceiling off. I was like, what? But yeah, off comes the ceiling of the set.
Oh, for that one. That was for
God.
the...
it's great, isn't it?
That was fun.
Also, I think I felt pressure in the edit to be like, it was really difficult. We should keep the shot in. And the editor's like, I don't give a shit. I don't care how you got the shot. Yeah.
I think within the design, what was really important is that... that there was a sense of belonging and sense of space. So, and I actually happen to know Sag Harbor, not per se, but the Hamptons and the areas, how the light works. Because of my previous project, I spent 1.5 years on and off sort of in New York, and then 9 months shooting sort of all across whether Catskills or Hamptons and so on. And Catherine and Nadia went for a scout in the previous versions.
Yeah, we'd spent a lot of time in Sag Harbor, just the two of us.
So it was really important that there was a sense of space, and that is sort of, the arts and crafts, which is very prevalent within the area that has a certain level. So obviously that comes with a lighter tonality. So we brought a lot of color sort of within the lights, and we kept the neutrality of the walls in in the houses. And because we were on a budget, there is a certain locations like, the bar and so on, which we actually, painted the walls with the light. So we just used the yellow or we used the red just to give a sort of a bit of a different sense because, introduced fairy lights or just, trying to sort of make it slightly less feeling like UK.
Yeah.
I think also there was always intended to be a kind of colour journey in the house in the sense of how every generation of it had changed it. So this kind of like very 70s kitchen and kind of Arts Deco window features, and then the ground floor is more kind of like mid-tones, and then it gets actually darker or more kind of saturated upstairs. So she was always trying to kind of create interest but not feel like, again, there'd been an intervention. Like, you had to come up with, like, a family reason for why something had happened. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I remember arguing about the phone for ages and it not... Yeah, but if it was Aunt Gladys versus great-grandmother... You know what I mean? Like, we would always sort of
which generation was this historically attached to?
Yeah.
And it didn't feel much like a set. It was, it was beautifully dressed, and there was a just incredible attention to details from
there's this shot where Corey's under the bed. He just had to get under there and stay under there. So I kind of crawled under there to like talk to him to do some acting notes.
We have pictures.
Just like his two pairs of legs hanging out the side of the bed. But and I got under there and he's playing. There were all these like 80s like Pez dispensers that were underneath, and I was like, why have they dressed underneath the bed? And he was like, dude, there's all sorts of great shit under here. Do you know what I mean? Like old Nintendo games.
Tweety pie with a flip head.
Yeah, but they totally just like dressed it in case. Do you know what I mean? They were like, every inch of this is dressed in case you want to.
It was Catherine and Sean.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. It was bonkers.
The genius side of her. Yeah.
But in a way, that was great. Also because me and Ula were like, there's no such thing as finishing 5 minutes early. We'll just make up a scene and we'll shoot something. We'll improvise. Charles, brushing his hair or, getting dressed in the morning or whatever, and you could open a drawer, pull something out and be like, all right, stick that on. Yeah. We're going to make up a... Because if you're shooting a film about somebody in the house, you just need all that stuff of him just being in the space.
Needs to feel lived in and carry that, especially because thematically it's all about the swamped by history, essentially. For the younger generation, for anyone who didn't grow up in the 1980s, P-E-Z is how you spell Pez, and you should Google it later. Best sweets ever. You got the studio builds. How do you go about, or how did you go about putting there's these beautiful golden light on the exteriors that needs to sort of push into the interiors, and then there's a journey of that golden light into a slightly colder, slightly more monochromatic space. What was the lighting journey of the house?
I think it was really important that my memory of New York, and as a state New York, is that the winters are really sunny, and there is a sense of sun creeping in. And also within Charles' sort of psyche is that he's trying to bring the world outside away from him. So the sun rays are sort of finding its way despite the fact that he's just like closing most of the curtains. That's how we introduce him. So I had a journey of light. So we just used a lot of Dinos and 10Ks and 20Ks or whatever. It's like in the I don't think we had 20Ks, but we had Dinos sort of wrap around with 5Ks for open glass 5Ks for the shafts of light, which then become a sort of its own journey, gelled to become the sort of nightmare sodium light. And Peter Chester and the gaffer and I just sort of figured out a way where we could put the sodiums all across the woodlands in Martha Mauer, where we shot the exterior of Charles Blakey, which we got given for free from Dave Nye, another gaffer who was amazing, who couldn't work with us. So that was a journey. But it was really important that sort of that I can reuse the lights as much as I can, and then gel it. So tungsten is always sort of a favorable way of working if I can, and I found it quite versatile for what the quality of light I was looking for.
Yeah, and did you have to? How many days were you in the set build for So you had to like make these changes middle of the day kind of thing.
No, I think we kept it. I mean, there were changes within the day or night, but we just had so little time. I mean, with the SAG rules and 10-hour day in the UK, you end up having an actor for 9 hours. Out of that 9 hours, you have to rehearse. So and then you've got 4 scenes to shoot. So you need to be really quite.
4 would have been a light day. Yeah. Like 6 or 7.
Yeah. So we just sort of, we try to, really boringly sort of combine it together, be story sensitive, and then have enough sort of things to put in on the lamps prepared for the gel. So we actually do very minimal, everything is on dimmers, and then me sort of having very stern look of going, are we ready?
That look doesn't change. It's there on every project. I guess going back to the timing thing, like there's such beautiful golden sunlight in the exteriors. That's just impossible to achieve by lighting means. How did you control the schedule so that you could be prepared for those moments?
The film gods.
Yeah. Okay. Honestly, just like the weirdest, best luck. It didn't rain a single day
Except
that we
the
were
time
trying
when we
to do,
wanted.
except for when we wanted to, which is when we were doing driving scenes, because we didn't have the correct exteriors. So we were like, wouldn't it be great if it rained now? Thanks. Yeah, we had some just like remarkable good luck.
But the worst part is that when we prepped in November, I think it was like a storm after storm after storm. They went through the whole alphabet of a male and female names, and then I actually went to buy another wet weather coat, and I almost cried in the store, going that I've never seen so much rain. And then as soon as we start filming, we obviously have done a little bit of due diligence of looking into the light, knowing where the light is, thanks to your notes, my sort of obsession with knowing where the light is and flexibility. So we try to position what it was like a camping with the food truck in the right position of the light. So we've always been looking. But a lot of it is a luck. It's like with Martha Mauer, when we positioned Charles Blakey, we talked about the orientation of the house. So we were very lucky that the house which we couldn't move and the house where we were hoping to plan to film it, there was very little we could have done. And because of the dual aspect of where we can actually build the exterior of the house, and it happened to work that we were mainly south-facing. So we just clocked the house according to the lights to make sure that we got the best light into it. The same with the cemetery, we made sure that the cemetery is looking in the right direction, so we can map it all to the position of how we want to see the house, be at the right time of the day, not create camera shadows. So it's a mixture of scheduling, knowing where to look, and a little bit of luck.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that precision goes into my next question. So I was going to say I've got 3 questions left. So you lot better be ready to ask some questions, okay?
Or
3 questions. We're coming for you. So yes, similarly, there's beautiful visual reinforcements all the way through the film of a character that's trapped, frames within frames, mirror reflections, trapped, confined by both his past and his family's historical past and intergenerational trauma. How do you break the theme down into a kind of shot-based thematic structure? That's the tricky question I should have asked you earlier on to have an answer for.
No, I think it's very clearly, like, even at a script level, it's a film about choices. And weirdly to me, like, because one of the images is of, he opens his door and there's this white guy, being like, hey, do you want this huge lump of money to... And I was very interested in door frames, therefore, as places of choice. I was sort of interested in Aniston turning up slightly like a vampire, needing to be let in. But that whole thing of, like, permission and choice and that whole sense of whether to stay or go. So, like, the scene where he kind of wakes from his nightmare and finds that he's in the ocean. You know, that whole thing of like, do I head out to sea or do I go back? And so I sort of feel like that came when it just sort of naturally happened, I think, when we were like constructing our shot list. That this whole thing of like, therefore, when you see two things in relation to each other, it needs to feel like there's like an interesting choice or a difference happening between them. And I think that Catherine really lent into that with, you know, aligning the door frames in certain ways and windows in certain ways. So it always felt like there were sort of like smaller and smaller versions of things happening in the same image. And it's partly why we got to the split diopters as well, which were really early. It was like one of the first things we were like, split diopters, yes. Because I sort of like the idea of two things being in relationship to each other and both in focus, but totally different distances. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, to me, that sort of speaks to the themes of the...
Two shots.
Yeah.
And the power dynamic. But also I always feel that downstairs is really designed around this sort of circular sort of fluidity of Charles coming in, getting the beer, switching on the TV, going around, figuring out, hearing the door, opening one door, seeing the other door open. So there is a certain sort of circularity to it. And obviously, if you start building the house in a certain way, you always find frame of a frame, because you are able to look in the different corners, and then it's always, we sort of talked about how it is to feel that the house is sort of observing you as well, that you're, you know, that it has its own sort of mind and its own sort of way, which is why the lighting was sort of changing depending on the mood, and, you know, the time of day was really important where we were blocking. But also when we're talking about sort of like one of our favorites, one of the sort of more favorite scenes between Narcissus and Charles, when he comes in to bring the mask into her shop, is to use the mirror so we actually don't cut all the time, but we keep the idea of the two characters together and give them the space to sort of, you know, as a homage to
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I referred it to the Greek mid. Like, I was like, this is like the nice mid shot you see in so many Greek films. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I love it. But I really enjoy, one of the things I really enjoyed about working with Ula is that, like, I think sometimes when I make work, and this is true of my theatre work, I think there are people who make things where there's like an elegant solution. You know, there's one elegant solution that is like, and there are some people who make like hot messes. And I think I'm a hot mess person. Like, I just like, I'm more interested in the most perfect version of each scene rather than, oh, but there's one rule for the whole thing. And I felt like when we were getting ready to shoot that scene in her shop, it just felt right in the space. Like, as I was blocking it, I was like, this just feels like a wider two-shot, and we just see the move between the kind of setups, which doesn't speak to how anything else in the film is shot, but it made sense of the scene, and it was better for understanding how the scene plays out. And she never once tries to dissuade me from it, because she's like, yeah, that's the best way to tell what's happening in this scene. We have to see them react to each other and cross the space. And so we're like, yeah, that's how we're going to shoot
and let's
it.
put the mirror so we can actually give another depth to the space, so we can get Charles to... Which is why, sort of going back to sort of, you probably will ask me about the camera and lenses, we landed on spherical because we didn't want things to be too mushy. So we've got a way of controlling the depth of field rather than just constantly fighting the anamorphic side of it.
Yeah. And also, I guess it's, you've got these multiple no one is really defined by self. They're defined by the relationship with the co-host of the scene, as it were. And I mean, I definitely feel like you're in very safe hands when a seemingly simple over-the-shoulder shot. So one of my favourite shots in the film isn't show-offy at all. It's a very, very heavy over-the-shoulder shot from over Willem to Charles. Charles is imprisoned on the hard right of frame between the bars, and Willem's like overpowering the frame. And something that is just as simple as some collaborative relationships, it might just be shoot me I just need a shot of this person speaking the lines that I've written. But that framing choice and the compositional choice just augments, if you just turn the soundtrack down, exactly what Willem is delivering line-wise at that time. And so it's impressive that, those echoes go through the work, basically. Two questions left, you lot. Technically, I really admire your use of the mixed colour palette, and your night work is so complex and layered with colour choices. Can you talk a bit about that and your dusk for night work that you did on the beach, that kind of stuff? And what was the camera lens DIT lookup table combination that enabled that process?
I'm going to slow down because I literally don't
This
know
is
what,
like
I
a
don't know
really
what words you just said.
super nerdy. This is just for the cinematographers out there.
So dusk for night, which part?
Well, so I was just assuming that some of the work was like low, at very end of day,
At the
twilight
sunset,
for night kind of thing.
I think it's. I actually don't think that's true. I think we always shot. The only one is where he comes back from the swimming. That's dusk for dawn, but I think that's the only one.
Yeah.
Other thing, we shot night for night.
Yeah.
Which is the advantage of shooting in January, a lot of night. So
Yeah, no, it's lit or it's at the hour. We didn't do any, right? No,
I don't think we did any.
Simone is saying the same thing.
Yeah, thanks,
Yes, it was sort of we sort of shot. I mean the beach scene, the one when he's in the water, that sort of we were waiting for the light to go down. Yeah. And I saw the birds, and Nadia saw a character in water.
I was like, don't you shoot those fucking birds. I was like, if you see birds murmurating, I'm not interested.
And we did, yeah. Anyway, so that was it. And then, and I think for the coming back, we were waiting when to push the light to be sort of right at the brink of it when he's coming back wet. So I think we shot it slightly in the brighter time, and then we shot it again.
I think we used the last one. I think we used the darkest one.
Yeah.
Where you were like, this one's useless. And I called you from the edit saying, you were wrong.
Always. But also I guess the more urban environment, so around his house has got the kind of mixture of a little bit of moonlight on the trees and the sodium vapor, and the same goes for the deer, the moment with the running over of the deer, that expansive set.
You mean our John Carpenter bit?
Yeah,
I remember
exactly,
I was like, Ula, where's that red light come from? She goes, it's the lights on the back of his car. And I went, that far? Do you know what I mean? She was like, just give me this. And I was like, all right, fine. And it looks great. It looks amazing. Do you know what I mean?
It had to be lit by something which is not moonlight. Yeah. It was just like, I think the whole idea was that I think we had a big discussions about the moment when Charles switches off the light and how the darkness looked dark. Is the darkness a moonlight? Is the darkness black? And Nadia said, let's go black. And I was like, great. So we don't have moonlight, or we have only one night when it's a little bit of a moonlight, rather than in some cases, it's always a moonlight. Yeah. So
edging trees or just texture of branches, that kind of thing.
So it's finding the aesthetic where you again can. We said that in the dreamscape the moonlight can happen, but in the so when Charles is running as a boy, as a young Charles, it's fine to have a moonlight because it lives within the sort of realm of his imagination. But otherwise, things has to sort of be. Has a storyline, so there was a different variations within the different scenes at night.
Yeah, so it's amazing. So my final question: so how did you? So it's such a colourful film, and there's such a great colour journey across things. I really love how stark the confrontational moment in the basement is, with just the photo flood bulb above their heads.
So good, right?
Yeah, so good. But there's such a great sort of color collaboration. How did you guys collaborate with Simone, the colorist on Final Color? How many days did you have? How do you communicate? How do you communicate your ideas between you? Who's sort of in the driving seat making decisions? How does that? I'm intrigued. Having spent a lot of time sitting in a grading suite myself, I've never been with another cinematographer, another director other than the ones that I work with. I'm just interested to see how that process works for you.
Yeah, I would say that grading was, I'm not just saying this because I can see Simone over there, but it was like the biggest revelation to me, because obviously I'd made 2 short films, and you grade those for about like the 30 minutes that somebody will give you to let you, grade your short film. And we had 2 weeks just to do the cinema.
10 days, so five days
Yeah.
each to do the cinema version, and then sort of tweaks for the HDR and SDR.
And, and there we were, locked in a kind of room listening to weird music a lot of the time if Simone was picking it. But it sort of never occurred to me, there's like the adage of like, you write the film and then you rewrite it when you shoot it, then you rewrite it in the edit. But nobody had really told me that you can rewrite it in the grade, because actually colour just affects so much about how you feel about a film, and also about how you feel about 2 characters in relation to each other. And even, we wrangled their skin tones for quite a long time for coming out, because obviously we'd shot with, I don't want to speak on any technical behalf, but, we'd shot with 1 LUTs, and then you get in there and you're like, okay, we need to slightly, rethink this a little, because it's not,
Well, it's a one light, so then you sort of go and finesse.
But actually it's like even something like just trying to establish the kind of base of note kind of what the basement is and how light operates in the basement, and therefore how it impacts on skin tones. I'm like, already this is making me feel like wildly differently about these 2 people, because if we lift Corey this much, then it does this to Willem, and that feels like he feels a bit too old suddenly, or do you know what I mean? Like it's done a funny thing to, but just throughout the film, I just was sort of amazed by how powerful colour is as a storytelling tool. I don't know. I mean, you can only. I'm a bit like you. I've only been in my own grade, so I don't know. So I don't know whether anybody else gives a shit as much as I felt myself giving a shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, it really matters if this orange feels like it's tipping too red, because we've said that orange means one thing. You know what I mean? Like you sort of get into the kind of color theory of it.
I mean, the important thing is, I think, when you're on film set, is that there is some sort of order, so you don't have 50 LUTs each for different scene. So in my head, I always felt that the basement has to be neutral, and I always thought about conformist for some reason within the sort of neutrality of a tungsten bulb. And that was always my idea. In rushes, we couldn't finesse the LUT the way how we wanted. So in rushes, it all sort of looked a little bit too blue.
It was always too blue. I was like, oh, he's like at the bottom of a swimming pool. God.
But I knew that when we go into so I think that the part of the difficulty within the one light LUT is that I think nowadays studios expect you to have a final film, but when you also have a very short period of time for a prep, you sort of give yourself a very rough brushstroke. So, and I think a matter of sort of grade and sitting with a director at the grade is to know whether you can push the color into more saturated and vibrant realm or not. And Nadia was very responsive to the ideas and had her own ideas. And obviously we had a levels of introducing. So we haven't changed the nature, but we sort of, exaggerated and massaged it in a grade with Simone, who did an absolutely, I must say, just stunning
It's psychology.
job.
It's all psychology. Colour is psychology. And so it's like, if we want him to feel more vulnerable, like in that scene where he's, going around the house because he thinks Aniston's there and he's got a shovel, it's like we spent ages like seeking like what the black was. Do you know what I mean? Like whether it was too blue, whether it felt like it was getting a bit grainy, and because it was like, oh, you need to feel like there's actual fear living in these shadows for him. It's very difficult to make a black man appear vulnerable because all of representation has pushed us so far in the other way. That's like, how do I believe that this guy is really vulnerable? He's scared. He can't see the corners of his own house. Do you know what I mean? Like, we did a test screening of it really early on, and I really laugh because people always think that Willem's going to be hiding behind the door when he closes it, and I was like, just going to make this dark enough so that people think that he's actually hiding there. But so yeah, I think that it feels. You're right, it is massaging, but it's like really vital stuff that you're doing. That was honestly, it was the biggest revelation for me in the whole filmmaking process. I did not expect to get into the grade and be like, there are still decisions to be made. Like, damn, this is going to totally change how people feel about this film. I just never had that much time with it, you know.
But I also think that the sort of the decision on contrast level is almost the most vital decision. You know, I like contrast. I think it triggers our primal brain, is how we see how we see it through the rods, how we perceive the threat, how we can get confused where things are not contrasty enough, and then they become shimmer and they play around with our perception. And I think there's something really fascinating. So it was, you know, the idea of the shadows and the house, you know, just felt, you know, to find the right contrast in the grade just felt like a fun discovery to do for all of us.
Yeah, and I love the kind of split tone color contrast across the skin tones as well in the early part of the, you know, I guess like in the semi-happy time before Willem turns up and things go a little pear-shaped for poor Charles when his past comes to haunt him. But yeah, there's just beautiful slate grey blues in the edge light reflection from the windows and the amber from the top light. Yeah, it's just elegant, very elegant work.
I like the scene at the end where Willem's covered in shit and Corey is actually lighting the scene just using a torch, and it's just like Ula chasing him around with a bounce board, and But I was like, that to me, that was my happiest day on set, just because I was like, you know, it feels live, it feels like actor and lighting and camera are all pulling together, and it makes me like, however kind of like gnarly it is, in the end it feels real. And I think that was always the thing that I enjoyed about the basement. Like, I was like, as frustrating a place as this is, because we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4 bulbs, like, and that's it. We've still got.
And you keep knocking them off.
I did, yeah. I was like, and no more lights. Sorry, Jerry. Like, honestly, she was like, can't the lamp work? No, it's in the plot. I mean, filling in the windows. Sorry.
So, Ula, was that your happiest day on the set when Charles was lighting himself with the?
When we were in the swimming pool and she was really warm.
Oh yeah.
After that was day 4. That's why.
That was day 5.
Yeah.
And it's a bit rank, but somebody like floated a pizza over to her, like on like a kickboard. And
the glamour.
Just
glamour.
Just like
because night before we were so cold, I thought that I'm in the purgatory. It just felt like everything was getting bigger. It was like a big bang a bit. It was really surreal. Anyway, we should let people to.
So that was the end of my 10 questions, although it ended up being about 15. Does anybody in the audience have a question for Ula and Nadia? Are there any hands? I can't see a thing. Are there any hands up in the audience? There is one at the back there. Thank you, Duncan. There we go.
One little technical question. The scene where the 3 of them were sitting around the table and the camera was going around. Did you have a light fixed, or was it moving with the rig?
We everything was dimming up and down. Otherwise, you would have a camera shadows.
That's what I was.
So it was actually to find the rhythm of it, because you obviously had practicals, so they were very gently going up and down.
God, I forgot about that.
Thank you.
You just said that, and I was like, oh, I've just had a little sick feeling in my stomach about. And we did it. There was no coverage. We only shot it that way, and we shot it 11 times, and we just had to be like. And to be fair, power to our producers, because we're going to commit, we're going to do this, and they were like, okay. But I'd forgotten that every time it moved, and like you could see somebody sped up, everybody else was just going. All my cues have gone. I like that bit.
Yeah, another question out there. Any more hands? There's one down the front here, please, Duncan.
Super minor. Just was wondering, like one of the last shots that you get of Alistair's character, like the super contrasty, there's just light on his face, it's very close up, and his skin was kind of like almost had like a bit of a softness and a glow to it. So I was just wondering, in terms of like from camera, lens, filter, and light selection, like you achieved this like really soft, almost dreamy kind of look on him. I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, we sort of, I think a lot of it was the flare of the coolie lamp. So we talked about the one light in the basement, which is gonna, give the majority of the lighting. And because it was H series, so they're quite old. They do have imperfection and they flare sometimes, which was to surprise. Most of the time, it was coming up with some beauty solutions, but sometimes it was giving us a little bit of a sort of fun in the grade. But I try to choose the right lenses and do very little filtering. So I don't think that I used any filters on this film.
What were the lenses?
Pardon?
What were the lenses?
H series.
H
series, and then I had a close focus Zeiss, which I might have used pearlescent on it.
Which was the fun zoom?
We had a Cook Varietal. Sorry, Kerry. I had a Cook Varietal old zoom, which I actually shot quite a few projects on. They are quite. They're beautiful, but they also can do funky stuff at times.
Oh, didn't we? We had that weird. There's that abnormality that's still in one of the shots that gave us a
but it's
right
okay
old
when you
nightmare.
look at it.
Yeah, it's fine. It will know it's there.
The weirdest thing about like micro obsessing at the grade is that the molehill become like a Himalayas. And I was really worried about that shot. And when I saw it in Toronto, totally fine. What was the problem?
I feel like I really enjoy the zooms in the film because, like, my favorite periods of cinema are probably the 70s and the 90s, and it sort of takes me back to 70s cinema. And I sort of really enjoy that they move between being like very, very subtle to like wah wah wah, like we're doing a thing. But I just remember when we were shooting, it's the bit where Corey at the very end admits that he killed his uncle or let him die. Much debate about that. But and we would, it was beautiful. It was just like the best acting ever. Oh, lovely zoom. And then it just like nulled out, like it just like reset. And I was like, tell me that can be fixed in VFX. And VFX looked at, they're like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
Oh, really?
yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think we sort of blocked it out by then. But yeah,
it got sticky at times. It was
it
old
got
lens.
It was an old lens.
Yeah, but it was beautiful.
Yeah, I guess with zooms, you're either channeling the conversation or like Starsky and Hutch. So somewhere between.
It's always the conversation.
It's always the conversation. Another question out there?
Nick.
Yeah. Thanks, Dunks.
Hey, lovely work yet again. I just wonder about the use of light and the direction of light and the quality of the light. It seemed you seemed to go between the what you call sort of naturally scene-motivated light, often very moody but certainly always beautiful, to sometimes you were quite full front light, kind of caught in a spotlight sense to the light, particularly on the what's his name, who's in the in the prison, as it were.
Aniston. Yeah.
Yeah. Just could you say anything about that, or?
I think I wanted the Coolie light to have its own sort of its own sort of personality. So we talked about the sort of position where Charles is gonna, when it feels like a confrontation. So it sort of forces Aniston to be, as you say, into the spotlight of it. and there is a certain level of a confrontation behind it. And also the choices when we're sort of slightly sideways and we can bring him more to the shadow at the times when he's really at the end of the cage and in half shadow or in complete darkness when the camera is right behind. So I think I would like to say that you know, when we were blocking the scenes, we always said, because Charles was the driving force, is the one who could sort of move around. We always talked about how we're gonna position the actor, what is the confrontation, and where the camera wants to be with Charles or want to observe Charles, and you're going between the two characters. And that's very much is gonna be, that was sort of gathering our lighting choices and camera choices. You know, whether we wanted to be with him or whether we wanted to be away observing.
I think also there's a point in the film where a light bulb becomes the most important object between them. Like it is the representation of power. And we always said that after that point, the way that the lights behaved in the basement had to change, also because you were dealing with somebody who was dealing with having complete darkness, right? And in a way, you wanted to be in his kind of experience of experiencing light for the first time after a period of complete darkness. So everything does feel
we
harsher
changed
and more horrible, and we changed the bulb.
Yeah, so I had a sort of pearlescent bulb, and then when we've changed the coulis into a clear photo flat for that moment. So it just felt really quite empowering.
Yeah, that scene is sort of the light's quite aggressive in its unflinching gaze, as it were. I mean, I really love how when Aniston's at his most frank and matter of fact and it's like confrontational without being confrontational because I'm just delivering you facts. He's in the starkest vision and the version of the light, and Charles is kind of one step back, trying to keep himself away from the truth. So it's another reinforcement of the theme, really.
Yeah, I was really influenced by there's a black and white documentary called The Laughing Man, which is about a ex-Nazi who leaves Germany and goes to basically be a mercenary in West Africa, and me and Willem watched it a lot. But there's something like that. I mean, there's no artistry to it. There's just a camera, and he's talking to it and drinking and smoking. But I quite like that there was something about just confronting somebody saying the worst things imaginable. Like, there's just nothing to hide in. It's just like a guy being like, this is what I did. And also, I think it reflects the character's psychology very well, because he has guilt about some things, but he doesn't have guilt about other things. So in a way, you just have to shine a light on him.
And I think it's like it's in a way not looking for the always beautiful solution with the light. It's just let the light to play the story and be flat, and it's okay, because when it's important to bring the darkness and starkness to then tell another story is more important, then always look and strive for the most beautiful shot.
I find the shot where he's actually dead in the cage like slightly underwhelming in a way that's really interesting to me. Like, it's just a guy on the floor. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's no
matter of fact.
Yeah. And one was like, "Do you want me to like piss myself?" Or do you know what I mean? Like anything to. And I was like, "No, I just think you died." Like, I was very the thing that I'm always adapting in my head, not literally, is Heart of Darkness, the Joseph Conrad novel. And which obviously became Apocalypse Now. And but the thing that I really like about that story is he goes through this whole journey, Marlowe, of like, I'm going to go find Kurtz and I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to figure out the Heart of Darkness, basically. And then he finds him, and they get on the boat, and you're like, great, now I'm going to get the thing. He's going to tell me everything about white men in Africa and the Heart of Darkness. And then he dies. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, that's not how life works. And so I sort of, when we were shooting that scene, you know, we shot a lot of that handheld. I just like the fact that it was this like quite like flat, uninteresting, undramatic lighting, because it's like he's just dead, like it's just a body. And then sort of after that, you get back into a kind of baroqueness with the burying of the body and the burning of the, you know what I mean? Like there's still like a kind of hangover of the previous bit, but actually when he dies, it's just like switch on lights, there he is.
Yeah, it's like to illustrate absence of character. It's like there's nothing more of his life force is in the room.
Yeah, and that was, and in fact, when we were grading it, and you go from it's really weird how changing somebody's eye colour changes totally everything about them. And Willem actually naturally has blue eyes, so obviously he's wearing brown contact lenses. But weirdly, that scene where Charles says to him, talks about Moby Dick, and is the only scene where you see Willem in his brown contact lenses, and suddenly that scene's like really warm and lovely, and I was like, oh, they could stay here for months, and you come back in and you're like, oh no, he's dead.
Yeah. Another question up the front. Thank you, Duncan.
The dreaded mic. Ula, gorgeous colour, texture, as always, really beautiful. But my question really for Nadia. I shot a feature with a theatre director.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was it was great. It was wonderful.
Do you want to name names? We will know each other.
Simon Godwin.
Oh yeah, I know Simon. Shit. All right, cool. Shakespeare. That's Simon.
Yes,
we
that's
call him.
Yeah. I was fascinated in how that culture was so different from the culture of film and how we meshed them to make the film. For you, now that you've made a film, what has that given you that theatre hasn't? And conversely, what have you lost making a film that theatre does give you?
Ula, I lost Ula. She can't go. I'm doing a play in the spring, which she's going to come and take stills, just for fun. But I think that I've always wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a theatre director because I grew up in Sudan, which is where I'm from, and I grew up in a country that had no theatres, no cinemas, no television. It's very footloose. And to me, but I grew up watching films. My parents ran an illegal cinema club, and we would import films on VHS, which gives away my age, and we'd hide them in like boxes of like coffee and rice, and then you like get it out and it didn't have a label on it, and you like stick it in the VHS and then go, oh, Blue Velvet, and then we'd like project them on a sheet in our garden. But so I grew up watching films, but I think that when I moved to this country for my education, theatre was just like the most radically different thing to me. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just like, what the hell is this? But my references have always been films. I think the thing that theatre gives you is an interest in audiences and an interest in the collective ability of audiences to construct a story. We often talk about the fourth act in theatre being that when the audience go into the bar afterwards, that's the thing you're trying to construct with a play. You're actually not just constructing the experience you have before the curtain call. And I think that with this film, I was like, how can I construct a fourth act? Like, and me and actually Robert Ike Aurilo, our composer, talked about that a lot, about that sense of the film leaving people with questions, but also sonically, the score leaves you on. It suddenly, it moves up in key in the final 4 minutes, and it ends on an inhale. It is actually sorry. I know you're all cinematographers, but it's like sound diversion. But Robert is like a king of modular synth, and all of the sound, all the music in the film is recorded from the actors' bodies. So he would put contact mics on their throats and on their hands and on their feet, and just have them exploring the various kind of locations and sets. And if he were here, he would be like, that bit, that's Willem's fingernails on the bars. You know what I mean? But you think it's drums, it's not. But he also went with us to Sag Harbor and would do, he's got those, they're geode mics, so they record vibrations rather than sound, of like trees and roads and the beach. There's a very funny image of him recording the sea. To turn into the music, and all of the music in the end is a series of inhales from Corey and Willem turned into strings and such. Anyway, but yeah, so we always wanted to leave the audience with a sense of what are you going to go and talk about in the bar afterwards. I think the thing that film has given me is a desire to be more authored in the work, because like in theatre I work in new writing, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of writers, but my job is fundamentally to bring the writer's vision to the stage, whereas I think in film, I've enjoyed being the writer, actually. Do you know what I mean? And being like, there's an authored like vision that can get really small. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but yeah. And I'm Miss Ula. It's but yeah, I'm doing a film adaptation on stage next. So I'm doing a stage adaptation of Babak Anwari's film Under the Shadow. So which I've never done. I've never done film adaptation. So I'm kind of like, it's gonna be kind of cool to
like
bring it back,
deconstruct and reconstruct.
Yeah, and we were talking at dinner like about how like there's obviously if you haven't seen it, it's a fucking great film, and but there's obviously loads of like horror tricks that are kind of easier to do in a film, but obviously theatre did most of those tricks first, right? So I'm very interested in like Victorian horror theatre and like smoke and mirrors and like really practical magic, and it's like, how do you make a chador fly? And it's like, anyway. So I'm gonna keep doing both. I really want to do I don't know if Ula's going to want to shoot this, but I really want to do like a reimagining of Le Grand Bouffe, if anyone's ever seen it. Anyone see Le Grand Bouffe, or just me? But 4 white guys who make a pact to kind of eat themselves to death, hence the Great Feast. I thought you'd like that. But it's kind of like a cult scatological satire, I guess is the only way. And we've had a little practice now, but yeah, it gets pretty gnarly. But I'm not sure anyone's got the stomach for it at the moment. So it sort of feels like white guys are maybe like eating the whole planet at the moment.
Okay.
So maybe
another
we don't
capitalism.
Well, we bonded on Cannibal Carnival, right?
Yes. Yeah. Fuck. I just want to keep making films about men being gross.
Should be. There's a lot of source material.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think we should go and have a drink.
I think we should. Is that Ula saying we should wrap up? We should wrap up. So, without further ado, I would like to say a huge thank you to Panavision once again for sponsoring the screening and tonight's event. And I'd love to thank Ula Pontikos BSC for being the BSC member in the spotlight. And we are blessed to have a director in our presence in Nadia Latif, the director of The Man in My Basement. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.